This is Susan of Susan's Big Ethical Think and also founder of Susan Lawson Ethical Thought Leadership. And this is my very first full length video. Um, Now, you would expect that I would talk for the first time about simply what is thought leadership, what is thought leadership marketing, but that's too boring. I will probably touch on that as we speak, but I want to talk I want to just grab in there and talk about something that might actually be useful immediately to people. Now, as I said in the introduction, um, this podcast is not going to be a marketing podcast, but it will obviously look at marketing, particularly thought leadership marketing. But it is going to be much broader than that. It's going to look at what is ethical business, what is sustainable finance. We'll look at sustainability issues. We'll look at the backlash against ethical business and current political and economic scenarios. Although, as I said, I will avoid the most controversial issues because I'm not personally prepared to deal with the backlash on that. And again, we may have a collaborator at some point, but for the minute, it's just me. So I rather than launching there in some like massively topical issue, I am going to talk about marketing today, but I'm going to talk about marketing in a way that I hope resonates with people who are founders of ethical businesses or just ethically minded in general. So I don't want to do like a broad marketing topic. I do want to look at this issue of how you position yourself in relation to other ethical companies, and that would obviously sound a little bit strange, and we get back to this whole issue of, well, what on earth has ethical business got to do with marketing? Well, the fact is, an ethical business is still a business. Now, if you're not a business, you're either a charity or you're a social enterprise, which obviously is fine, but it's not the same as a business. Now, if you are a business, i.e., you need to post a profit to exist, then obviously you have to care about marketing and you have to care about brand positioning. But I'm still talking to people who fully care that their brand, their company is making a positive contribution to the world. And that's where thought leadership marketing is incredibly useful, because really what you are doing is making a serious contribution to thinking and to the world. And at the same time, it just happens to be marketing. So, but there is a kind of, so what I want to talk about is though, the the way that a lot of companies are going about this is quite scattergun, and it's quite unprofessional, and possibly because a lot of ethical businesses feel uncomfortable about the notion of marketing. You've got to get beyond that. You have to. If you're a brand, I mean, let's take the really obvious examples that have become kind of, the leaders now. Innocent smoothies, for example. There are others. The Body Shop was probably the original one, obviously back in the 80s. I think the Body Shop would have been the very first one. Obviously that's old hat now, but Innocent is now huge, and we all know that. Well, I hope we all know that Innocent as a company is still doing an awful lot of good in the world, although occasionally it's had criticism. But there is this kind of dichotomy with these ethical businesses of, you, well, why did you start it in the first place? You obviously wanted to change things. You obviously wanted to make things better. You don't think the world is great as it is, but at the same time, you are fully aware that you also need to make a living. Also, if a company cannot produce a profit, then how is it going to make an impact? So we're always straddling this funny line, and which is why you end up with these funny attitudes towards marketing of ethical businesses. So I want to talk about one particular issue at the minute today for me that's in my mind, is the way that ethical companies don't necessarily look carefully at their, they often do look at their brand positioning, they don't really look at their thought positioning. And in fact, I would say this about all companies now. I think that thought leadership marketing to be honest, it's a joke. A lot of it is a joke. There's no thought goes into it. It's not positioned. It's not aligned. Companies often don't know what they truly believe or think, and then they're doing thought. How on earth can you lead thought in the world if you don't know truly what you already think and believe? And don't get me started on using AI for thought leadership. It can be used. It can be used. I do use it sometimes for certain purposes behind the scenes. However, if you really believe you can entrust your thought leadership fully to a machine, you don't understand, you just don't understand what leading thought actually means and thought leadership means. But I'm certainly not going to start banging on about AI in this video. I do use it myself, but I don't use it in the ways that some people use it. But it's a whole different subject. I want to talk about then this idea of brand positioning, value positioning, ethical positioning, and also in relation to your competitors. Now, the concept of competitors to an ethical company can sometimes be problematic because, let's face it, ethical companies have a different idea of competition, because often we will be, in a sense, working towards the same goals. I'm not the most social person. I'll be honest about that. I'm not going to pretend that I am. So I'm not all huggy and lovey and joining ethical groups, but I still do see sometimes my purpose as being aligned with the purpose of other ethical companies. And so, obviously you have a slightly less aggressive version of what competitor means than a standard company would. But nonetheless, you do still, unless you are a charity or a social enterprise, you do still have competition. So obviously you do understand that you need to brand position and align yourself in relation to other brands. But often when companies do their thought leadership, they don't look at the competition, or the let's call it collaborator competitors, if that's an easier phrase. We don't look at what the competitor collaborators are doing thought leadership wise, and it can seem as if it's very straightforward. So an example that I find very useful as an example is, let's take the vegan space, or let's not use the phrase vegan because vegan means something specific. Let's take the non-meat space. I don't exactly know what it's called, and I'm not, by the way, saying that is inherently more ethical or less ethical. I'm certainly not trying to attack meat eaters in this video, although I happen to not be one, but I'm not attacking it. I just think it's a very good example because people from the outside, so meat eaters, would believe that all companies who happen to be producing meat-free products all have the same thinking. They really, really don't. There's a huge difference between a company whose ethical goal is to just generally reduce cow farts. Let's call it that, cow farts. We want to reduce beef eating by a little bit, by every consumer maybe has beef one less day per week, is a hugely different remit. And also that's coming from say an environmental angle on cow farts, ranging through to a full-on vegan thinking, which is more concerned with animal rights than it is about the environment. Okay, so but you can have multiple companies all who appear to be doing the same thing, i.e. producing meat alternatives, but who have radically different political views, radically different remits, and radically different demographics. And I've talked about this on my website about how that would affect how you were leading thought, even though a lot of people would see all those companies as being in the same space. But also it is really crucial that you look, not only clarify what you truly believe, but also I do think it's important to look at your, say, let's say your top 5 competitors, and look at how are they positioning their thinking, and how are they positioning their thought leadership? Who are they aiming at? What voice are they speaking in? Are they speaking in a more serious academic tone? Are they speaking in a more direct, almost aggressively political tone on purpose, or are they being quite neutral? You do need to know these things in relation to how you position yourself. That I'm not trying to suggest you should be completely inauthentic and only say things in a particular tone of voice because your competitors aren't. But I'm hoping that as a company that self-identify, I hate that phrase, but self-identifies as an ethical company, um, I like to think that you wouldn't be doing it from a cynical perspective, but nonetheless, you do still need to be aware of how your competitors are positioned. You do need to, being an ethical company doesn't absolve you of brand responsibility. So this is just the first thing I'll talk about today. There are some links. I will put some links below. Whatever that means, I don't know if I'll put them on the video or if I'll put them under the video. It depends where I post this video. I'll give you a link to a case study that I did on this kind of issue. Um, and but so this is just like lesson number 1, is that thought leadership marketing, it can feel divorced from ordinary kinds of marketing because it is much more serious and earnest, and so you can feel as if you don't need to be aware of what your competitors are doing. And particularly if you consider yourself, if you self-identify as an ethical company, then you may feel that the word competitor is aggressive. But at the end of the day, you are a business, not a charity, and you do have to look at these issues. And also, just by looking at what your competitor collaborators are doing, will give you a stronger sense of what you do truly believe, because you can see what you don't believe, or oh, I agree with that bit, but I don't, I think our company is different in this way. There's nothing cynical about this if it's done properly. It's very important to know exactly what you do stand for as a company, and then to express that. And that's the only way that you can do genuinely authentic and powerful and impactful thought leadership that leads to proper brand trust, but also, it leads to hopefully you feeling proud as a company and as a brand. Because thought leadership marketing can be a form of marketing, but it also can be a form of advocacy. And we will talk about that in another video. So, okay, I don't know if I've said too much or too little. It's literally the first video I've ever tried. Please bear with me if I haven't, if you don't feel that I've delivered the material in a helpful way. I hope it has been useful, but it literally is my very first attempt. And by the way, I'm aware that the most logical thing to have talked about would have been the question, what is thought leadership marketing? But frankly, it was a little bit too dull. I will leave that for another video, and I thought I'd just launch in what the subject that I'm currently thinking most about. So, okay, thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.